Okay, let's go sit down and we're just,
We're gonna roll through it.
All right.
Brad, thanks for taking the time to go through this process
Yeah.
with me. I'm going to admit right up front that this is going to feel a little uncomfortable for me because I'm always in the coaching mode, and this is a final summative evaluation
Okay.
conversation, so bear with me as I stumble my way through this. I was very excited to listen to the audio recording that you and Angela made during your pre and post conversations. So most of what I'm going to focus on is about the actual coaching cycles that you participate in, but you'll see with this document, I'll share this with you, that I went ahead and kind of talked about the different teaching standards and the bigger scope of the work that you do, because I know that you're assigned to do more than just coach one-on-one with teachers, that you have professional learning, you work with departments, and there's some building professional development and some district level professional development. But the data that I have to share with you was on the coaching.
Okay.
So one of the questions I guess I'd like your input on, or your thought about, is how effective did you feel that this coaching cycle that you just completed with Angela was on helping Angela to reflect on her implementation of sheltered instruction?
Okay. I don't know if the video or the audio recording bared this out, and probably it didn't, but at the end of our kind of talk together, we had focused in on thinking about strategies for Angela to use within her class to get kids to process through working on math problems. And I think they were doing graphing of, I have it here, they were doing, working through graphing on various functions to compress and stretch and doing translations like that. And she wanted to focus in on asking them to process that after they had gone through an example with her and then worked one with themselves. And so towards the end of that, we were actually, towards the end of that coaching cycle, I think we were actually crafting questions for her to ask. So in that sense, that was probably the most productive piece of that particular coaching cycle, which, you know, kind of felt like I earned my money, at least on that round. So.
And that kind of leads right into Standard 5 was one of the areas that when we had our pre-conference that you were interested in us thinking about deeply, and that's using a variety of methods to monitor learning. And I think you just gave an example from this cycle where Angela set a goal and assessed her own learning. Can you think of, and you don't have to be restricted with Angela now, I mean, that's the conference that I have the data from, but I know that you coach many teachers. So can you think of another example where you used a variety of methods to monitor the coach's learning?
Well, just with Angela, I scripted the lesson that she gave that back to her, let her look through it, talk through it. With somebody like Mrs. Chandler, I've taken different sorts of data. So, you know, her, I think one time we looked at her interaction with students and how long she maybe took with each student. And we looked at, and then we focused in specifically on another go-round with objectives, writing content and language objectives. I know with Ms. Musel, we looked maybe more specifically at the structure of scaffolding for students this last go-round for her students, working with writing, what do you call them, claims, you know, argumentative claims. So, and just giving those feedback, the different types of feedback, but usually, you know, its basis is in speaking and collecting data and then talking through. So.
Okay, those are strong examples. Which leads me to my next question. Standard 7 was also a focus that we talked about, and that's engaging in professional growth. And when we look at the criteria for Standard 7, let's take a look at that real quick. Are there specific examples of the work that you're doing now, or how is the work supporting your professional growth? And maybe we need to think of that in both directions. What kinds of professional learning or support do you feel that you would need to grow in your professional craft of coaching? So either direction. What are you doing now that you think is helping your professional growth, and what supports do you think you would need?
I think one of the things I do, I guess there are two kind of practices that I use pretty regularly. The first is Dee and I, after we go through a coaching cycle, we'll often just have an informal conversation about, here's how I think it went, here's some of the questions that I asked, maybe I could have done this differently or that differently, that sort of reflective thinking. Since on this kind of go-round now, I've started to journal myself so that I have both a sort of discussion piece informally with Dee, as well as maybe a little more formalized in terms of jotting some notes down about, so that I can at least go back to those notes and go, oh yeah, going into the next cycle with any one of these teachers, this is what we were working on, this is kind of the nudges that I thought I'd have to use and move through. So that's what I'm already doing. I think this is, in terms of what I can do, this sort of conversation is an excellent way of growing my work as a coach. And I continue to work on that learning curve by reading and that sort of stuff.
So tell me about how the coaching for sheltered instructional Moodle course, and then the time that we spend both with our instructor at our level, and then just last night we spent 2 hours with model classroom teachers at the AEA participating in their learning as well. Do you have any thoughts about how that may or may not be, and I don't mean to ask you a leading question here, but your thoughts on the intersection of that outside of the district learning provided to us, how that is impacting your work?
Yeah, that really is, I think, the heart and the focus of our work. And the reading from those courses, I think, are applicable because I start to look for those now, and not just in the model classroom teachers' classes, but in just about everybody's classroom that I go into, through mentoring. And in the planning situations, when I sit with teachers and do some planning, we're looking for, asking questions about interaction, asking questions about scaffolding and those sorts of things. That really is a beneficial structure. What's nice in the SIAP course is that we have those questions that she provides for us. A lot of times we just blatantly go back to those and use those questions because they're there, they're handy, they're excellent questions, they're what we need to focus on. So.
Well, and from an implementation perspective, Brad, what you're telling me is that the district is providing learning for you, and then you can provide evidence that you're actually going back and implementing the learning that we're all experiencing. So. Yeah. That's good to hear. That's good to hear. Okay, I provided just some documentation from standards that we don't have to go through here. You'll be able to read through those, and then if you have any questions about those statements, I'd be glad to discuss them in more detail. I thought you might like that for your portfolio.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah. Now, data. From the pre and the post observation conversations, we had agreed that I would collect some interaction data from the audio tapes, and I did that, and I have that to share. This is where it's not coaching, because if it were coaching, it would be, Brad, I have some data, would you like to?
What do you think about this?
Would you like to
What do you
look at
see
this?
here?
And
Yeah.
now it's going to be, Brad, let's look at this data. And this I know will take you more time to digest, but here it is. The capital letters were your responses, and the lowercase letters were Angela's response. And what I have to tell you before I start is I'm not very confident in my validity or my narrator reliability. I'm not sure. I listened to the audio tape twice. I think if I went through a third time, I would still be changing my marks. So, and part of it for me was in the coding. I actually added codes as I started listening because I realized that I wanted to capture more depth. So you can see that these are your responses, and the pre-observation, and again, it's going to take a little while to look at this, but and here's the post-observation. And so if you look,
Yeah, much less questioning. Huh?
this is where I had to, particularly about halfway through this conversation, I had to add a new code because the conversation between the two of you moved from this is what I observed, this is what I observed, to a problem had been identified. And then the two of you moved into problem-solving mode, and the gist of the conversation changed. I have those. Obviously, you have them too. You could go back and listen to those conversations and see where that shift in conversation happened. The other thing that I didn't capture in notes, but I wanted to point out to you that I could go back, but my general sense is that Angela spent considerably more time talking than what you did.
Yeah.
And that probably doesn't surprise you.
No.
But I don't have the minutes logged
No.
for that. But you've already noticed one thing that's different between the two conversations.
And I guess I would expect more questions maybe in the pre-observation to get at some things. But given the way that the post-observation went, I think questioning probably may have been a stronger prompting technique, especially given the idea of the problem solving that we were trying to work through.
Keep in mind that this was not a script of the entire time.
Yeah.
The audio that I had was limited in time, and so this was the script of that time. The other thing I noticed in the conversation is that during the post-observation, Angela's responses were very reflective. She was just automatically giving her thoughts about how things went, and I think that speaks well to Angela's where she is, as a classroom teacher as well. But I guess you've made a couple observations here. The one that struck me is that your conversation and the way you led the conversation for the pre-observation was different than the post-observation. That you didn't just have a script that you went through for both. You weren't following. It was clear to me that you had planned questions, but you weren't just like a robot moving right through coaching moves, one right after another, like checking them off of the box, which I think is positive, very positive. Yeah. Please don't misinterpret that as. The other thing I wish that I would have done is done a little better time with keeping track of minutes, but I didn't do that. So I wanted you to have that data that you could go back and digest and maybe have more questions about yourself, reflective questions. Another thing that I wanted, looking at data, I wanted you to think just a little bit right now is, and I come up with these crazy little speed signs here. that I kind of wanted you just to do a little reflection right now, us together, about the different components of your job. And so I'm going to ask you just to kind of draw a little speedometer line to where you feel that you are, going from totally insecure in my practice to very confident to at the top neutral. And I broke it down into your knowledge level and your comfort level with sheltered instructional practices, and then just the one-on-one coaching, which is what we've kind of focused on. You also plan and deliver Wednesday professional development for the building, and then you plan and you are part of teams that deliver full-day staff in service district-wide. And then another one I was just curious about having you think about is managing your workload, how you prioritize your duty, the timelines that you set up for yourself. And then I left some others in case you thought of something else that you wanted to report on. So just very quickly, not a lot of thought, just your kind of a dipstick. How do I feel right now? Can you grab a pen and go through those?
Yeah, I think so. You want me to talk through as I do it?
No, just do it right now.
Okay. Oh, this is cozy.
Yeah.
Probably like this. Probably more like that. Planning is not a problem.
Okay.
And then I think the workload is not, I mean, it hasn't been, and there are some, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but.
Yeah, and those are just if you had others that you wanted, that you thought you wanted to.
Mm-hmm. But I think, because it has been a learning curve, there's been a lot of PSYOP learning. I'm feeling a lot more confident than I was last year or the year previous.
Okay.
And probably if I go back in my memory, in one of the first years we did it, we had coaches that would come in and work with us. That was a great sort of experience, being on the other side of that now as a coach. I'm, because of the learning I've been provided, because of the learning I've kind of caught up on this year too, I'm feeling much more confident with that. Still, I know there are things in coaching one-to-one that I probably should be listening for, should be kind of asking questions about. And just the newness, I'm less comfortable with the coaching situation than, I'd like to be able to hear things and go, oh yeah, this may indicate that, ask a question about, but I'm just not. The weirdness of planning and delivering Wednesday PD, the planning isn't necessarily a problem, but being in front of this particular staff, I'm not 100% comfortable. It just is weird for me. And that, and getting used to presenting to teachers in that sort of format, there are just some quirks to it that I've got to deal with and get over. But the in-service, I felt very comfortable with, because it's maybe a smaller group of teachers. I'm, co-teaching with a couple of others. I think we have developed some good stuff, some good in-service. So I've been really comfortable with that. And the workload, usually we focus on, what's coming next. And thus far, I've been very comfortable with that too. We've just kind of come out of a period where we're less hectic and less busy, and I'm ready for some more. All right.
Ready for another round?
Let's get it rolling.
There'll be another round coming. That we have another full day PD yet this year.
It's coming, so. And measures of other things, I guess if I were going to measure one other, that would be focusing on and fostering relationships with people within the building, both administrators, teachers, folks like yourself, and I think I'm doing pretty well at that. And within the last week or so, just making some sort of connections with teachers as I've been going around to their common unit planning and talking with them about common unit, talking with them about just about anything else. And getting used to that sort of different speed. You know, you're not always the shift from being a classroom teacher to being a coach. You know, you're not always thinking about obsessed with what comes next. You know, tomorrow's lesson needs to, you know,
Right.
I need to go get this stuff done for that. And so that's been a
Shift.
just been a shift.
It is a shift.
Yeah.
It is a shift.
So, and I'm getting used to it.
You know, one thing I'm going to comment here that I appreciate that you've said this and that you see this as sort of a goal that you have for yourself. The fact that departments have already reached out to you and you have organized some department planning, that you're working with groups of teachers that were unsolicited. I mean, they reached out to you for specific help, speaks well to the relationships that you have in your first year of coaching.
Yeah, good.
So the reason that I wanted you to kind of think about these things is to get you kind of in a mindset that we could talk about setting goals. Now, we're not going to do that during this observation, this conference. That will
Okay.
come a little later. But I wanted to kind of leave you with something you could take with you that would get you thinking about if I were to set a goal for my work. You know, what might that kind of, what area might you want that goal to be in? So that was just to kind of help you think along that line. And you know, one of the areas that I guess I just a question that I want to just throw out there, and this would come to the coaching one-to-one here, would be what are your initial thoughts on investigating and learning more about the use of video in the coaching process?
Yeah, I'm open to that. I think it's time. The nice part about using video is going back and looking at some things and instead of just replaying it in your mind, actually having some objective data to replay and look at. Yeah.
What I think would be beneficial for all of us is probably most beneficial for the model classroom teachers. And I know we played a little bit with this last year when you were a model classroom teacher, so you've experienced from the teacher's side, I guess you could speak to this better than I could, the value that watching your practice through video as a teacher would have. I know that we would have conversation as coaches after working with teachers about what the coaches learned about themselves, you know, through the use of classroom video. So that was just, I guess if I were to give a recommendation to you, in addition to any personal goal that you may set, would be to engage in that.
Okay.
And we may have some learning opportunities coming up that would lend itself to that. So that would be, if there's an area of growth that I would suggest to you at this point in time, it would be in that direction. But we'll let you we'll let you think about that so that when we meet again, we can be a little more clear on goals that you may have for your work. So, is there anything that is still cluttered or not clear about what we've talked about?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Anything from our conversation that's kind of resonating with you right now that you think you're going to take away from and think about the rest of the day?
Well, probably the use of videotape, and then some thinking about the goal setting, but also each of those practices, and maybe doing some specific thinking about each of these practices, and setting some areas of growth about where I want to look at and focus. So, and then maybe some thinking about the pre and post observation conferences and the distinction between those two, and especially maybe if it fits a pattern, or I think really just thinking about if it fits a pattern, thinking about the coaching cycles I've already been through, and if it was a little bit different. Now, it strikes me that that one was maybe a little bit different than some of the others I've been through, but I just have to go back and look and think, so.
Well, and I didn't mean to suggest that there needed to be a scripted pattern. I
No,
just
no.
noticed in the data, but there was a difference
Yeah.
between the conversations, between the pre and the post.
Yeah.
So. Well, Brad, thank you for
Thank you.
for going along on this ride, and we'll meet and talk again.
Awesome. That's good stuff.